just thinks that Mifi is a drama queen. That pisses off the Dark Prince, and he says that all the Mervingers are arrogant. As Elric lays down, he thinks about the monologue, hoping that their voices can reach their descendants someday in the foreseeable future. Suddenly, he thinks that the voice he has been hearing all along was his grandfather's. He remembers the very first thing the voice ever said to him, to engulf the first cup of evil, as was intended by fate, which could have meant absorbing the powers of a demon. He looks at the collar, shocked. This collar must be the tool that lets him consume the Dark Prince, and possibly many more demons. Elric glances at the Dark Prince with a side-eye and wonders if he could absorb other demons like that, which implies that there are second and third cups still to come his way. This realization excites him, and the next thing he does is take the Dark Prince into the mountains. But he needs to check something before he figures out how to use the collar, so he starts meditating. Through his focus, he can hear and see everything. After that, he ignites a huge fire, which leaves the Dark Prince in utter shock, wondering how a human could use the magic of dragons. That is something he wouldn't have even expected from a Mervinger. On the other hand, Elric feels relieved as his mana avascularity, the disease that held him back, is finally cured, and he is no longer the shame of the glorious Mervinger family. Now he knows that it is time to make all the traitors and those who belittled him once regret their choices. Outside the hospital, the press gathers, seeking answers regarding Elric, but mainly concerning the excavation rites. However, Carl shuts them out, saying that further details will be given through the Turium and that a written statement will be provided. Then Carl walks up to Sean, shaking and begging him to never make him do that again. Carl seems serious about his social anxiety issues, but Sean brushes it off. Then, Carl reminds Sean that if people find out he's been handling things like this, the royal family and the Turium will be very mad at him. Sean assures him that Elric has a plan, and all he has to do is have faith in him. A while ago, Elric was in his room, thinking that the higher the stakes, the greater the rewards. That alone is enough to stress Sean out, since Carl just informed him that Elric left on his own, only leaving a note that he would be back soon. Suddenly, Carl sees an envelope, gets nervous realizing the gravity of the situation, and makes Sean aware of it. Out of nowhere, the gate blasts open, and in comes Sean's older sister Tasha, confronting him for doing something behind her back. Tasha is the Phoenix Witch. Unsurprisingly, Sean seems stressed by her sudden entry. The royal family, the Turium, and the Societas Fide have produced the top 3 geniuses of the contemporary era, referred to as the 3 Stars, or the Tristellar, who guide the Empire to glory. Tasha is one of the Tristellars. Tasha grabs Carl by the ear, wondering why he didn't give her letter to Sean, and he apologizes while being nervous, saying he's just been really caught up with his duties. Sean sweats and wonders why she's really here, and she says that she practices medicine and heard Elric was injured, so she came to help him. Sean knows he's screwed if she goes into that room, since Elric isn't there, so he needs to make her leave right now. But Tasha doesn't look like she cares one bit, and she reminds Sean who she really is. She gets straight to the point. What happened to the excavation rights to the den? Sean completely forgot that his sister has a thing for dragons, but he tells her that's for Elric to decide, not him. She understands, and she takes her leave, waiting for Elric to wake up. Right before she leaves, she tells him that his big sister is going to spank him for being a bad boy. Sean is terrified enough to crap his pants and hopes Elric comes back soon. On the other hand, Carl admits that he is about to faint as well. Meanwhile, the news is spreading everywhere that young Mervinger is still unconscious, and people wonder what will happen to the excavation rights. Elric sees the newspaper and knows that Sean is doing his job well. In the newspaper is a picture of Dean Veru, and Elric knows what's about to go down with him with a strange smile on his face. In Varrix's office, Liburn approaches him, addressing him as the minister, but Veru reminds him that the elections haven't even begun yet. Then Varrix asks Liburn how Elric is doing, and Liburn tells him that according to the rumors, Elric is about to die. Pretentiously, Varrix smiles and says that he is so sorry to hear that. Liburn suggests that it might be safer for someone to take care of things, but Varrix, out of rage, stops him. Then, Varrix puts his cup down and says that they'll be one professor short when the election is over, and he wonders who's going to take that spot. Liburn, seizing the opportunity, says that he won't let him down. Later that night, Elric stands outside a window and uses his inner eye, which allows him to see the other side of reality. He seeks the hidden grains into which he will inject the mana from the dragon heart. This way, he can cast magic without actually saying the words out loud. He casts the magic and takes his first step into the forest, which draws him toward the beginning of it. In order to bring Veru down and let the world know that the glory of the Mervingers is back, Elric knows he needs to become insanely powerful before the election takes place. The Dark Prince mocks Elric after seeing him only jump higher, scoffing if that's all he could do with all the powers he stole from him. But Elric takes that insult as motivation to become faster and stronger. As Elric closes his eyes, the Dark Prince grows irritated, unable to accept such a gesture of disregard. To him, closing one's eyes while in his presence is disrespectful. Still, Elric doesn't care what he says. He remembers something called incantation in dragon tongue magic. First, he forms the image of the magic in his mind. Then, all he has to do is speak it into existence. Watching him perform it effortlessly, the Dark Prince can't believe his eyes. Elric begins to fly. Even while feeling anxious, he still thinks it's amazing and hella powerful. So he gives it another try. The Dark Prince is baffled as he witnesses incantation and double casting executed simultaneously at a beginner level, no less. He knows the Mervingers have always been natural enemies of demon kind, terrifying in their potential, but no one has ever been as innately gifted as Elric. Suddenly a memory strikes him. There was one exception, the very first Mervinger. But the Dark Prince brushes the thought aside. This only strengthens his resolve. He must possess Elric soon, before he grows even stronger. He starts plotting how to do exactly that, all while following closely behind. Meanwhile, Elric reflects that while incantation is powerful, he's still too inexperienced to wield it proficiently. He needs a teacher, someone who understands dragon magic inside and out and can keep this secret. He certainly can't trust anyone from Varric's academy. Whoever it is must be as powerful as one of the lords of the Hexical. With no suitable candidates in mind, Elric almost gives up. But then, he remembers the best teacher around, the Dark Prince Mephis. So, Elric asks him directly if he would teach him. Mephis scoffs, wondering why he should. After all, what's in it for him? Elric lays down a bold offer. He'll use alchemy to create Mephis a new body, but only if Mephis trains him. Mephis tells him he's getting ahead of himself, but Elric reminds him that Mephis has little to gain if Elric doesn't become stronger. Acting like a sassy girlfriend, Mephis huffs, questioning why he should teach someone in weeks what took him eons to master. Instead, he offers Elric a deal. Become one with him, and he'll teach him everything, while secretly plotting his own dark agenda to take over Elric's body bit by bit, chipping off his soul. Elric, of course, finds him damn annoying, but he knows he holds the better bargaining chip. In response to Mephis's melodramatic rant, Elric shuts him up with a silly incantation, one that transforms the Dark Prince into a kawaii version of himself. Infuriated, Mephis rages even harder, while Elric cringes so hard at the sight that he nearly barfs his guts out. Elric, seeing the bunny ears on the Dark Prince, almost faints and barfs his guts out as he couldn't handle the cringy look. He hands over a diary and guides him to write down everything he knows about dragon tongue magic. If the notes are useful to Elric, he promises to unlock the curse. Later on, Mephis, clearly pissed, says that he endured 1,000 years of imprisonment, and this silly little incantation can't break him. Then Elric gets up to train. A few hours later, when the sun has gone down, the Dark Prince tells Elric that he will be kind and forgive him, only if he begs on his knees. But well, the young Mervinger really doesn't seem to care. Days pass, and Elric still hasn't asked for Mephis's help, which makes him pretty bored. So, Mephis starts writing down the basics of dragon tongue magic, while Elric stares at him and calls him a cutie pie. Being the Dark Prince, he takes this as an insult to his ego and decides not to give in. So Elric turns him into a dog in a suit. Then, he starts reading the basics of dragon tongue magic, but it is ancient knowledge he has never read about. Gaining the knowledge, he turns Mephis back into a human and asks for elaboration on the notes he made. If he finds them pleasing enough, Elric promises to let him talk too. He proceeds to point out that every chapter must be longer than the last, so Mephis has to write another chapter in order to speak for the next 3 days. Elric asks for a few more things to be thrown into the chapters, which enrages Mephis even more, but he chooses to wait, because he hid some black magic in those chapters. Magic that will soon devour Elric's body and soul. A few days later, Elric realizes that just by learning the basics, he has gotten really strong. This confuses Mephis, as nothing seems to be happening to Elric, even though he clearly hid the black magic in those chapters. Elric catches on from Mephis's expressions and wonders why he looks so stressed. Mephis tries to hide it, but Elric confronts him, saying, he really thought he was stupid enough to start training without observing things? Hearing that pisses Mephis off, as all his hard work of writing the spells goes in vain. But now Elric wants to know more, to which Mephis says that he has nothing left to tell him, except for his secret charms. Charms are the highest form of incantation, like the voice of God. Mephis is sure that Elric would not understand, even if he told him, and Elric realizes that he's not lying anymore. Then, Mephis says, magic is perfected on the battlefield, a saying the Mervingers used to go by. Elric knows that this is a phrase from their ancestors, who protected their lands from the demons' invasion. His father used to teach him about the history of the family who stood their ground on their war-damaged lands. Though he couldn't talk much due to the after effects of the war, Elric remembers that he was always reminiscing about the days when he used to fight battles with Elric's grandfather. Little Elric would ask his father if he could use the same magic his grandpa used to cast, and his father would always tell him that to become a great wizard, he should gather knowledge like one first. Using force without knowing the theory would lead to nothing, since his grandpa had also been the greatest scholar before becoming the strongest wizard ever. Elric's father would advise him to follow the guide of Hyza, and his mother would order him to finish reading his lesson by the end of the day. He would act rebellious and say he wanted to play with his dad instead, but Hyza used to grab him by the ear to train him. They indeed had a small, happy family. Well, time flew by. Along with his father, his mother fell ill too, and his father shared half his life force with her to keep her alive. He tries taking the blame on him, but Elric's mother tells her husband that she loved sharing every moment with him and their children. But now, Elric's father couldn't share his life force any longer. They were both on their deathbeds. Both of the little kids are weeping. His mother told Hyza to take care of little Elric, and his father told Elric that it wasn't important to be a wizard, but what truly brought him happiness was being their father. With that said, both of his parents left the world, leaving the two of them alone in this selfish world. Coming back to the present day, Elric thinks his father was wrong about not being a wizard, because it's easy to be betrayed when you are weak. To protect himself, Elric will become strong, he promises to himself. The battlefield is where magic is perfected, and with that aim, he knows that real-life practice is what he needs. Elric thinks about going to the haunted Red Forest, but the ghost-like monsters there would be too dangerous. Then he considers the Goblin Cave, but it's too crowded and well-known. Suddenly, he remembers that his father once told him there are sanctuaries all over the continent, where their ancestors used to live. He knows where to go now. So he tells Mephis that they're going to the land of ice and snow, the land of the snow people, the Yeti Highland. The next day, Elric took a bath in a lake. He needed to change his appearance so no one would recognize him. Using his magic, he enchanted the water to give him a fresh haircut, change his hair color, and remove all facial hair. By the time he stepped out, he looked like he'd walked off the cover of a Vogue magazine. Later, he made his way to the guild guide, where a man led him inside to find his Yeti Highland adventuring party. To Elric's surprise, the adventurers didn't look like adventurers at all. There was a child, 4 herb collectors, 3 monster hunters, and 5 people who were clearly hiding their identities. The child stepped forward and introduced himself with a bright smile, even giving a detailed explanation of his name. His name was Mingma, and he assured everyone that if they followed his lead, everything would be fine. Mephis was already annoyed, but Elric asked Mingma if he could find a telecrystal. Unfortunately, as Mingma explained, there were no telecrystals available, only carrier pigeons and letters are used in their region. The chatterbox child began to ramble again but quickly remembered they had to leave soon. He promised to continue his tale along the journey. Elric was worried because he needed to contact his sister soon. But for now, he left it up to Sean to figure something out. As their journey began, Mingma immediately started chattering again, as if it paid his bills. Before long, they arrived at their destination, the Yeti Highland. Mephis looked around and noted that the place seemed familiar. It was where the Yetis lived. Elric was surprised to hear that Mephis had seen Yetis before, and he asked if they were the same as demons. Mephis responded that Yetis didn't fall into the same category as him, clearly mad at even the reference, but Elric had never realized they were even related. Mephis then mentioned that the former king of the Yetis had a cruel fate. Otherwise, he might have been blessed by the Dark Lord greatly. He wondered aloud if the tomb of the former king was still there. Elric grew curious, but Mephis added that if the tomb had remained, it had likely been robbed long ago. A realization struck the young Mervinger. The tomb of the Yeti leader might be connected to his family, especially since Yetis were tied to demons. Elric remembered how his father once told him that the Mervinger sanctuaries were built by their ancestors to protect their legacy. He had wanted Elric to visit the Yeti Highlands one day, to uncover that legacy and pay respects to their ancestors. Back in the present, Elric began to wonder what this legacy could be, and glanced at the collar he wore, wondering if it held any information. Meanwhile, Mingma spoke of a myth from his tribe, a tale of a woman betrayed by her husband and left alone in the snowy wilderness. She died, but not permanently. Mephis, growing increasingly irritated, snapped at Elric to cast a spell to shut the chatterbox up. Elric, ever observant, noticed something unsettling. There were no snow people around. Just then, Mingma announced that they were about to enter the tough part of the path after crossing a hill. The group settled down to rest and eat for a while. Elric glanced at the other adventurers, and something about them stood out. They didn't seem like ordinary travelers. They resembled knights in service to a noble family. He wondered what their true mission was, and whether it had anything to do with him. Among them, one cloaked figure seemed to be their leader. When the cloak came off, it revealed a young woman. At the sight of her, some of the men began to harass her, until Chen, one of the knights, stepped forward to defend her, recognizing her noble status. The lady screamed and asked Chen to lower his sword, and he obeyed her, though his rage was apparent. Elric and Mephis quietly watched the commotion. Then, without warning, someone shouted for everyone to run. Panic broke out and people started looking, wondering what's about to happen. There was a sudden and massive attack on the entire team. Everyone immediately began to defend themselves, while Chen screamed for them to prioritize defending the noble lady. The whole scene reminded Elric of the den. Multiple Yetis had launched the attack, and Elric quickly formed a magic barrier to guide and protect everyone through his magic. But many were still being taken down. Elric and Mephis exchanged a side glance. Naturally, seeing the humans getting destroyed brought a bit of joy to Mephis. Elric had heard that snow people typically moved in groups of 10, but these numbers were far greater. Chen fought fiercely, determined to wipe out as many of the Yetis as he could. Meanwhile, Mephis couldn't keep his mouth shut with his constant commentary, especially since this was Elric's first ever practice on hardcore difficulty. Wanting to concentrate, Elric silenced Mephis with an incantation. Still, Elric found the experience exhilarating as a first practice. He watched Chen use his nightly aura to decimate the Yetis. Elric wished he could observe more, but he had to join the fight, as the invasion of snow people posed a serious threat, and there was a high likelihood that more would follow. If they struck quickly enough, they could take the lead in the battle. Next, Elric deactivated his disguise and summoned his armor. He reminded himself that he had saved this particular spell using Memorize. The Yetis seemed unstoppable, though his presence left them somewhat confused. Elric wasn't sure if his attack spells would be effective on them, but he knew he had to at least slow them down. With that said, Elric began kicking and slaying the monsters, casting various spells such as Explode, Burn, and Penetrate. His powerful attacks killed many of the Yetis, leaving only 2 remaining. The surviving Yetis attempted to silently sneak away, but Elric, ever alert, cleverly cast his Bind spell on them before they could escape and save their butts. After killing all the Yetis, Elric panted. Yet he loved the experience. He left one of them alive, got on his back after tying him up, and summoned Mephis. He called out for him, not remembering he had tied up Mephis's mouth a while ago, and Mephis was pretty upset about it. Elric released the incantation, and Mephis could speak again. Then Elric asked Mephis to translate whatever the Yeti said. Elric turned to the Yeti and gave him an offer. If he told Elric where his village was, he would let him live. Mephis translated that the Yeti asked to be untied and promised he would tell Elric everything. Elric was a bit hesitant, but Mephis said that negotiation through conversation would be better in circumstances like this. So Elric snapped his fingers and released the ties on the Yeti. Mephis began to whisper something to him, and the Yeti smiled at Elric in an evil way. What Mephis had said to the Yeti was to team up and wreck Elric. The Yeti suddenly moved to attack Elric, but his fast thinking saved him, and Elric bound the Yeti again. Now the Yeti and Mephis were both scared of Elric. Since Elric had regained the lead, the Yeti decided to show the way. Elric gave Mephis a polite reminder that back in the day, Mephis had killed the innocent snow people. Suddenly Elric stopped. He thought about how the powers of the ancient proto-dragon and Mephis were stored in his heart, and that he was only able to use 3% of their actual potential. If he were to use all of that power beyond his current limits, his body would explode, and he would die. He realized that fighting like this could get him killed, yet he didn't want to give up, since he wanted to restore the honor of his family's name. Elric thought about the noble lady and wondered if she was okay. On the other hand, Chen and the other knights had defended themselves, but the noble lady noticed that one of them was missing. Chen assured her that he must have run away or hidden himself, but that didn't stop her from worrying. Back to the young Mervinger, he reached the village of the Yetis and told them to lead him to their leader. Hearing this, the Yetis made way for the leader, and he came near Elric. Although Elric was a bit afraid, he proceeded to ask his questions. Under his cloak, he was protecting himself. If things went south, he'd have to take down the leader first. The leader of the Yetis noticed his green eyes and asked Elric for his name. Elric introduced himself, and the Yeti began to lead him somewhere. They walked as the Yeti told him that there used to be a legend in his tribe. Ages ago, there lived a mighty king who ruled the snowy mountains. There was a human being who was the king's only friend. The human had shiny green eyes and went by the name of Mervinger. That shocked Elric, as his ancestor had been a friend to the king of the snow people. Furthermore, the Yeti said that the leaders of his tribe had been taking care of the human's house for generations. Elric wondered where the house was located, and the Yeti pointed deep into the cliffs, revealing its location. After focusing for a bit, Elric realized that there really was a house down there. The leader said they went down there once a year when the winds were quiet. Mephis once again started with his commentary that Elric needed a powerful spell to go down there, or else he'd die if he didn't use one. But Elric, knowing he could die from the winds too, still ended up surprising Mephis and jumped down the cliff with a smile on his face. As soon as Elric jumps, Mephis thinks he's a lunatic but follows him, certain that Elric is going to die. Elric notices that the winds are way stronger than he expected them to be. Mephis seems to care about him and tells him to concentrate or he will end up losing his life. So Elric focuses and takes one step at a time, landing on the ground after jumping various times on the cliff as if he's walking. As he reaches the ground, he sits down and says to Mephis, "That's how he works." Then, Elric makes his way toward the house and sees that the door is locked with ancient magic. After thinking for a bit, Mephis suggests that he should try entering a mana pattern in words. So Elric tries various words like Dark Prince, Mervinger, Demon Hunter, Yeti, etc., but none of them work. Elric wonders if there is something else that would work besides the mana pattern, something more like a key. He picks up his collar, points it at the door, and the door unlocks as it was the key to the house. He looks at the house from the inside, and it is humongous and well preserved. It has a lot of books. He picks up a book named Fundamental Principles of Wizardry. He knows he's going to find a good fortune of knowledge over here. Meanwhile, Mephis looks around, knowing that this is the residence of the Winter Sage. Elric hears that and pops out, wondering what he is talking about. Mephis brushes it off. Elric can't help but think that something must have happened to him since he knows the King of the Snow People and his ancestor. Then he looks at a book named The History of Mervingers. Elric flips open the book and reads that destroying evil in its path is the sole duty of their family. That's what he heard in his dream as well. He reads further that TGE mission was bestowed upon their family by fate, and it is very much achievable. If only they could ingest them properly, swinging at evil again and again could bring about a new wave in wizardry. The book also says to eat, swallow, and drink, which means to feast on evil until he is full of it, and then turn it into something meaningful. Suddenly, his collar begins to shine and crackle, and the collar says to him, "Young Mervinger, you have passed the test of Grand Collar of Wizardry, and swallowed your first cup of evil, and now the next path shall begin." Suddenly, Elric opens his eyes into a strange place. He gets up and hears someone approaching him. The man says that he must be the young blood from the future who came to take over their duties. Elric gets up, and the man introduces himself as Otto Han Mervinger, the guide of the young Mervinger to their family's fate. He was one of the top 5 ancestors of the Mervinger family, and was the first to systematize the family's magic. Elric asks him if he is the Winter Sage, and Otto Han wonders how he knows that. Elric elaborates that Mephisto told him that, and suddenly realizes that Mephis is not with him. Otto Han realizes that the first cup of evil that he swallowed is the Dark Prince. Otto Han seems proud that his descendants are doing better than he expected. Meanwhile, on Mephis's side, he's just hanging out at the Mervinger house alone. Elric quickly asks what Otto meant by the fate he speaks of. Otto Han smiles and keeps his hand on Elric's head, knowing he must have quite a lot of queries regarding why they have to learn it this way instead of just being taught. So, he answers that the family has prepared something like a cartwheel. Once it begins to roll, they can't ever stop it. With that said, he releases a load of his mana. Then, he continues that they couldn't let it fall into the wrong hands, so this is why they test their descendants, even if it takes ages. But since Elric has passed their test, he gets to decide if he should stop the cartwheel or let it roll. Elric still doesn't understand the will of his family, but he decides to go with it, to restore his family's honor and succeed the will of his grandfather and ancestors, the true heroes of the Empire. This would also make him known as a great wizard, which has been a lifelong dream of his. Otto Han lets the ball of magic slide from his hand, which bursts with a huge flame, which paves a way. Hearing Elric, he gets pretty excited to see the ambition, then takes him to the cold, freezing mountains. Elric wonders where they are, and Otto Han makes him aware that this is where he will be tested for his first mission. The weather is making Elric shiver, but he knows that if he passes this, he will become insanely powerful, and the thought makes him smile, something that impresses Otto Han greatly, seeing the ambition of a Mervinger. Then, Otto Han points at a place of darkness, and after focusing for a bit, Elric sees a figure tied up in the darkness and wonders what that is. Otto Han tells him that it is the Mountain King, who is the only man to ever rule these mountains. The Mountain King had a dream of bringing the Snow People back to being demons before they were cast out. His motivation got the best of him, and this corrupt evil spirit is what became of him, as narrated by Otto Han. Furthermore, Otto Han tells Elric that the second cup of evil that he will swallow is the Mountain King. Hearing that, Elric almost pisses his pants, unsure how he will fight him, but Otto Han tells him that he has to devour it. Further, he explains to Elric that from now on, he must devour the demons and rid them of their life source, the seal. Elric doesn't know what that is, to which Otto Han explains that demons are born when dark, primitive emotions of the living, such as fear, depression, and resentment, gather around a conscience of their own, better known as an ego. A demon's ego is what decides the nature, rank, and identity of the demon, and the seal is the heart of the demon in which the ego is stored. Otto Hahn points at Elric's arm and tells him that on his arm is the core of Mephisto's identity. It's the seal of the Dark Prince. What Elric has to do is hunt them down and rob them of the root of their identity. Devouring a demon will make their powers his. Then, Otto Hahn begins to walk away, while Elric wonders how much stronger he will be if he can have that monstrous power for himself. The last thing Otto Hahn said to him was that he is trying to devour the demon, not trying to defeat it. Then, Elric flies toward the region, wondering what Otto Hahn meant, emphasizing the word devouring. The Mountain King feels the energy of Mephisto and Mervinger, and now they have to prove themselves to him. The Mountain King orders his minions, the guards of the king, to stop Elric. Elric observes that there are so many of them, and each one is more powerful than the ones he has fought until now, especially the Mountain King himself. He knows that if he could use a seal of original sin and the abilities of the Dark Prince, he could wipe out all of them, including the mountain. But the problem is, he doesn't know how to use it. Using his powers on his first test feels kind of like cheating, so he uses Magic Explode to create an explosion. What he wasn't expecting was something sharp in front of his face, and at that moment, he seemed pretty much fearful. Then, Elric proceeds to use his spells, Rise and Penetrate, against all the Snow People, which proves to be a good strategy to defend himself. After that, Elric says to them that before they were cast out, they were demons, and so they should understand what happens to those who don't have power. Hearing that, the Snow People become furious and charge at him, determined to end him. But the young Mervinger has a resilient spirit and knows that this challenge means nothing to him, as he can only get stronger by overcoming it. He raises his hand and attacks them again, but it ends up backfiring and hitting him instead of the Snow People, causing him to fall back. The guards stand ready with their swords raised while he thinks that he might lose, but he knows he can't just give in at his first real hardship like this. He tries to get up, though he doesn't know if his body will hold out. Suddenly, dark energy surrounds him, catching the guards by surprise. Elric looks at the guards, rage apparent on his face, and charges at them again. The energy emitting from him comes from the dragon heart, and he uses the same mana to fight back against the guards. Furthermore, he casts his spells Bloom and Scatter. Panting after using the spells, he runs away from the guards after taking down one of them. Elric falls to the ground, barely able to believe how tough the situation is, especially since all the soldiers are now coming back to life. He knows he has to think quickly about what to do next instead of allowing himself to be tired. Suddenly, something begins to attack him. He doesn't know quite what it is and tries to defend himself from it, but it turns out to be the seal. He thinks to himself that it's not as clear as the seal of the original sun, but it's definitely something new. He's not entirely sure what it is, but it provides a soothing feeling to his dragon heart and keeps it from bursting. Maybe this is why the demons called the seal by their proper names. Furthermore, he realizes that this is why they have to know the demons' real names to harness their true power, just as Otto Hahn had taught him. Though Elric wonders how he will discover their real names, since they won't simply reveal them if he asks casually, Otto Hahn had assured him that when the time comes, he will feel the name himself. As more soldiers approach him, Elric begins to channel mana into the palms of his hands. He thinks to himself that the proper name of the Snow People is Ruthlessness. He can't explain why, but he just knows how to use the seal. With his magic, he clears a path away from the Snow People, confident now that he knows their true name, Ruthless. It definitely takes a significant chunk of mana, but with a smile on his face, Elric thinks to himself that it looks like he used the power of the seal correctly, and now there are only a few more enemies left to take down. Suddenly, he collapses to the ground, not knowing exactly what just happened as the darkness spreads through his vision. Suddenly, Elric opens his eyes, sweating, in his grandfather's house while lying on the ground, unable to process what just happened. He hears Mephis, who observes him with a smirk and comments that it looks like Elric has been through a lot. Elric can't believe Mephis is with him again. Mephis explains that Elric's little necklace was rattling the whole time, so he thought Elric was having another devouring session, and it seems like Elric found it hard to devour this time. Poor Elric, still sweating, wonders if he wasn't dead this entire time. He must have blacked out after using up all of his mana, and when he overdid it with the seal, he lost consciousness. Still, despite all of that, he exceeds all his expectations. He thinks that if the incomplete seal of Ruthlessness is this powerful, he can't even imagine how strong the seal of original sin would be. Yet, he doesn't know how to use either of them. Mephis then asks if that was the seal of Ruthlessness, and if so, he is sure that it was the Winter Sage who did that to him. Elric asks Mephis how to use the seal of original sin. Mephis realizes that he has already told Elric about proper names and everything, but he also makes it clear that he won't reveal a single bit about it. No matter what kind of humiliation Elric puts him through, Mephis will never open his mouth. Elric, realizing how serious the situation is, nervously says that Mephis doesn't need to get so serious about it. He was just asking. However, Elric already saw that response coming. After all, a seal means everything to a demon, and asking about it is like asking to have everything taken away from him. So, for now, Elric has to give up. Although Elric knows that the seal of original sin is the seal of the Dark Prince, he thinks that if using the seal of ruthlessness was enough to knock him out, then he won't be able to use the seal of original sin anyway. Then, Elric asks Mephis if he knows the Mountain King, and Mephis admits that he does but asks why Elric wants to know. Elric explains that he has been told this is the Mountain King's grave, and that he has to defeat him here, which greatly surprises Mephis. Mephis knew Adohan was mad, but he never thought he would be insane enough to send Elric against someone as powerful as the Mountain King. Elric smiles and asks if Mephis has any ideas, but Mephis immediately shakes his head in refusal. Elric tries to convince him, saying that the Mountain King isn't even a demon anymore, so it should be fine to tell him. That infuriates Mephis, who screams if Elric really expects him to tell the biggest secret of their kind, which could be their greatest weakness. Elric puts up an offer, 3 days without the spell of cuteness. Mephis refuses, so Elric sweetens the deal, 5 days without the spell of cuteness. Now that sounds appealing to Mephis, and he agrees, referring to himself as the benevolent prince. Elric laughs, realizing it only took 5 days to convince him. Now Mephis gets serious. He says that the way Elric is now, he won't even be able to approach the Mountain King, let alone pass his ancestors' test. Still grinning, Mephis says that there is a way he can take. The next thing Elric knows, he finds himself back in the cold mountains, determined to make good use of the hint Mephis gave him. The hint was that he needs to improve his achievement status depending on a seal's rarity. It can be ranked as normal, great, prestigious, original, or mythical. Each of these ranks requires a certain level of achievement that determines his proficiency with the seal. Mephis also told him that the Seal of Ruthlessness is a prestigious rank, which is relatively high. At the moment, Elric's achievement status is 1 star at most, while the Mountain King's seal is 10 stars. So he needs to raise his achievement to 10 stars, or become an original rank wizard himself. Elric can't believe that he's only at 1 star, but he is motivated to show everyone the grit of a Mervinger. He doesn't care if he has to do it 100 or 1,000 times, he will devour all of them. Now Elric finds himself in the cold mountains again, facing the Mountain King once more. He knows that battling all the soldiers only raised his achievement status to 2 stars, which means he will have to battle the Mountain King directly to raise his stars further. He sees the black cloud of dark energy, which at first he thought was just the shadow of the Mountain King. He wonders how powerful the Mountain King must be to still be this strong even after death. He questions whether Adohan actually wants him dead, considering the task he's been given. Nonetheless, Elric is still motivated to devour the Mountain King. But suddenly, Elric opens his eyes once more in his grandfather's house. He laughs, saying that he tried super hard to collect the seal but didn't even see it coming. However, he feels a bit concerned about how he is supposed to beat something that powerful. Mephis tries to lure him into giving up, but Elric loves the idea of devouring something that strong. A greedy look appears on his face, which Mephis notices. Then, something unexpected happens. Elric asks Mephis if the Mountain King was actually a female, which makes Mephis visibly flinch. Elric stares at him, and Mephis gets weirded out, asking why he's looking at him like that. That's when Elric realizes that something must have happened between the Mountain King and the Dark Prince. Something fishy and fruity. Something he will find out with time. His priority right now is to devour the Mountain King, even though he's not exactly sure how he's going to do it. But one thing is certain, he will figure it out after he beats her to the ground. Elric leaps towards the Ice Mountain King, yelling at her to die. The Ice Mountain King uses her ice spell on Elric. Elric feels the pain in his body and head. After that, Elric breaks the Ice Mountain King's ice spell, realizing that he is slowly getting closer to her, little by little, and can finally see her face. The Ice Mountain King growls at Elric, and he realizes how to use the Ice Mountain King's seal of cruelty. Elric knows that it is difficult for someone like him, who had just attained the seal, to surpass the being who had already mastered it. He thinks with determination that he will surpass it. The Ice Mountain King growls again at Elric, and he presses his palm against the Ice Mountain King's palm. Elric mutters that he will surpass it, even if he has to steal everything from the Ice Mountain King. The Ice Mountain King throws Elric away with her ice spell, and Elric falls down. Adohan watches the scene and thinks that it would not be strange for Elric's ego if he keeps dying like this. He sees that Elric is still smiling, and realizes that Elric not only has innate talent, but also possesses an unsubmitting will and an endless desire to improve himself. Seeing Elric cutting the Ice Mountain King's arm, Adohan realizes that Elric is someone who would never appear even in their family. He believes that Elric is a lunatic, Elric chuckles, saying that he has reached the 3 to 5 star level. In an instant, the Ice Mountain King attacks Elric. Elric tries to defend himself, saying that the Ice Mountain King doesn't even give him time to breathe. Elric uses his powers to protect himself from the spell of the Ice Mountain King. Feeling his powers weaken against her, Elric curses and wonders if this is his limit. He realizes that just stealing is not enough to defeat the Ice Mountain King, and he must become her. Elric's tattooed hand glows, and he feels his body weakening. He wonders if he died again. After that, Elric glances into the memories of the Ice Mountain King. Elric sees Mephisto coming towards the Ice Mountain King and asking her to prove that she is worthy enough to be part of their race. Seeing this, Elric wonders what in the world is happening. Elric watches the past of the Ice Mountain King and sees that their demon god, their queen, the leader of the Highlands, has delivered them an oracle. Elric sees that the Ice Mountain King was born as the king who would come to rule the Ice Mountain, but she could not be satisfied with just the Ice Mountain, even though she was the first in the history of the Ice Mountain to unite the tribes. The Ice Mountain King decided to reclaim their former glory, saying that since they were once part of the almighty demon race, they would once again return to their rightful place. Elric sees in the memories of the Ice Mountain King that beyond the ordinary Ice Mountain, they made countless humans and demons kneel before them, and at last, they once again became part of the demon race. And even further, the Ice Mountain King tried to become a demon king, but the wall of an almighty demon king, Mephistopheles, was too high, and the Ice Mountain King had no choice but to taste the bitterness of defeat. Nevertheless, the Ice Mountain King never stopped and did whatever it took to polish her true name and evolve her seal. The Ice Mountain King tells Elric that she took the first step, and that he could receive Mephistopheles' acknowledgement. But she was blocked by a wall steeper than anything she had ever faced before. All forces charged against her team, and her comrades began begging for their lives. The Ice Mountain King yelled at them, reminding them that they were members of the proud demon race and that there was nothing they could not accomplish. She tells Elric that she saw Otto Han Mervinger attacking them relentlessly. That was how they lost the war against the humans led by Otto Han and were driven back to the Ice Mountain. The Ice Mountain King had shouted at Otto Han, asking why humans, who already had everything, could not allow creatures like them to have even a small part of it. Sobbing, the Ice Mountain King looks at Elric and slowly stands. Elric watches her with sorrow, then cups his chin and says that despite her despair, she endured countless hardships to reclaim the glory of her race. He tells her that he appreciates her, recognizing that it is a great and noble duty. In the past, after that battle, Otto Han settled in the Ice Mountain to keep watch over her. Through countless battles, the two came to respect each other and spent a long time together. However, the Ice Mountain King, unable to free herself completely from her ambitions, eventually became a monster and met her end at Otto Han's hands. In the present, the Ice Mountain King tells Elric that he must be the descendant Otto Han once spoke about. Smiling at Elric, she says that seeing how he erased a portion of her mania and even severed her arm, it seems Otto Han's boasts were not mistaken. Elric immediately apologizes, expressing regret for her lost arm. The Ice Mountain King chuckles and tells him that, even though she ended up like this, unable to abandon her ambitions, she is still a king and a warrior who once led her race. She says she does not need pity from her enemy. Hearing this, Elric is sort of shocked. The Ice Mountain King continues, saying that it seems the time has finally come to end this long battle. She says it is time for her to apologize to her people and honor their sacrifices. She admits that she regrets ever desiring to be part of the demon race, realizing now that simply being happy with those she loved would have been enough. Watching her, Elric realizes that the Ice Mountain King is being consumed by demonic energy. He wonders what he should do. As he sees her awaken her powers, he reminds himself that his opponent is the Ice Mountain King, the ruler who united the vast Ice Mountain, the greatest warrior of the Yetis, and an enemy he must overcome. Elric knows he must use his full strength to defeat her, both out of necessity and as a sign of respect. Resolute, Elric decides to show her the greatness she had built. They lock eyes, gritting their teeth, the rage in their glowing eyes burning brighter than ever. The next second, they get into a battle against each other while using their powers. The Ice Mountain King attacks Elric with her axe and he grits his teeth, knowing he has to become him. They continue to fight, and Elric begins to feel strange as he finds himself enjoying it, even though this is clearly a battle with his life on the line. Elric attacks on the Ice Mountain King with full rage and wonders why it feels fun. He realizes that he can feel the days full of happiness that the Ice Mountain King spent with Otto Han. The Ice Mountain King pushes Elric away, but he blocks his attack. They both leap and land in front of each other once again, having reached their limits. They prepare for the final blow, knowing the battle will be decided at this moment, with the technique that brought countless races to their knees, which is the Ice Mountain King's secret art, Icebreaker. They both glare at each other and press their palms together. The ice begins to crack and Elric unleashes the final blow. The Ice Mountain King chuckles and thanks Elric in the end. Elric looks down and widens his eyes as he sees the tears into the Ice Mountain King's face. Then, the Ice Mountain King smiles and begins to disappear into a glowing light. As she vanishes completely, Elric notices the flowers blooming on the place where she once stood. He wishes for her soul to rest in peace and realizes that his first assignment has come to an end. Otto claps for Elric and compliments him, saying that he actually managed to swallow the Ice Mountain King. Elric asks him if the first assignment is way too hard from the start. Otto replies that anything goes in their family. He says to Elric that he cannot call himself a mervenger if he cannot overcome something like this. Elric sighs and realizes that this is why Sean calls mervengers egoistical. Otto walks towards Elric and admits that he is still surprised. He tells Elric that even if he has talent, he thought it would take him at least 1 to 3 years. Otto says to Elric that he never imagined that a person like him, who has only learned magic for a few years, managed to defeat the Ice Mountain King. Elric corrects Otto saying that it has only been a month since he learned magic. Elric counts on his fingers and states that since he spent a month here, it has been 2 months now. Otto says to Elric that he is bad at joking. Elric looks at him with a stern look and Otto asks him if it is really not some egotistical mervenger joke. Elric sighs and Otto laughs. He hugs Elric, saying that he sure has an eye for people. Elric tries to quote what Otto was just saying earlier. Otto curses Elric while laughing and hugs him more tightly. Elric winces in pain as Otto beard hurts him. After that, Otto then wonders what the final moments of the Ice Mountain King were like. Elric replies that she was smiling and hearing that Otto feels relieved. Elric bows and thanks him for everything. Otto advises Elric to be careful on his way back. Elric tells him that he probably won't be able to visit often, to which Otto reassures him that he understands. The position of the lord of a family is a busy one. Elric begins to leave, but suddenly he turns back around and asks Otto how he will get out of here. Otto chuckles and says to Elric that he has already gone out countless times. He asks Elric if he does not remember it. Elric looks at him in confusion as Otto throws an ice crystal towards Elric. Elric finds himself back at the place and curses at Otto He is worried about his handsome face and sighs. Mephisto laughs at Elric, saying that it looks like Otto killed him. Elric yells, asking who kills someone without warning. Mephisto asks Elric if he has devoured the Ice Mountain King. Elric uncovers his tattooed hand and replies that it just happened. Mephis chuckles and claims that this is all thanks to his support. Elric agrees, calling Mephisto the best demon. He says to Mephis that he sure flipped the stage upside down. Hearing this, Mephis looks at him in disbelief, thinking that all he did was tell him a few things and he transcends the realm of a genius, which leaves Mephis wondering if Elric is the monster. Elric tells Mephisto that he is curious about something. He asks Mephisto if he was in a special relationship with the Ice Mountain King and why he stopped her from becoming a demon. Mephisto asks Elric how he does know about it. Elric smirks and replies that he ended up taking a glance into the Ice Mountain King's memories. Mephisto answers his question, saying that he is a demon king, and the Ice Mountain King is the dregs of the demon race, and there is nothing more about it. Mephisto explains that at that time, he was just bored, but he heard there was someone who stated that they will become a demon in the Ice Mountain, so he went to see what they looked like. He tells Elric that the Ice Mountain King was a bit lacking to become a demon king, but her ambition and skill were commendable. Mephisto states that if the one that the Ice Mountain King met was not a benevolent king like him, and someone like Azazel or Lilith instead, she would have been blown to bits. Mephisto adds that in any case, he told the Ice Mountain King to come find him again after she had gotten stronger, and just left her. Elric asks Mephisto if that is all and he never meets the Ice Mountain King again. He yells at Elric and asks why in the world he would meet her. Elric watches the memories of the Ice Mountain King and Otto and understands what happened. He chuckles and Mephisto asks him what he understood. Elric giggles and asks Mephisto if he knows the way that brats bully the girls they love one-sidedly. Mephisto yells at Elric asking what he is talking about. Elric mocks Mephisto, saying that is why he is still single after over 1,000 years. Mephisto curses at Elric, asking how he dares to mock him. Elric continues to mock him, calling him single. Mephisto yells at Elric to die. On the other hand, Otto punches the sky, thinking what an amusing descendant he was. He internally asks the Ice Mountain King if she thinks the same. Otto internally asks her if he resents him. He gets flashbacks of the Ice Mountain King crying while holding the baby in her hands because she killed him by her own hands. She looked at Otto and begged him to kill her. Coming out from the memories, Otto presses his palms together. He apologizes to the Ice Mountain King. He looks up at the sky and asks the Ice Mountain King to leave her regrets and duty to that child, and rest in peace. Otto continues looking up at the sky and asks the Ice Mountain King to meet him again in the next life. He sighs, hoping that it will be more beautiful than before. Mephisto asks Elric what he is rummaging around for. Elric goes through the book and replies that he is looking for something. Elric rolls an ice crystal with his fingers, and Mephisto asks if it is an ice crystal. Elric recalls his previous conversation with Otto Hahn. Otto Hahn throws an ice crystal towards Elric and asks him to take this and find the god of camellia. Elric asks Otto Hahn if he means the camellia flower. Otto Hahn confirms Elric's question, saying that person will become his new guide. Elric asks Otto Hahn if this is also an assignment. Otto Hahn replies that it is. Elric questions how long he has to do the assignments for because he will become a bent-over geezer at this rate. Otto Hahn replies to Elric that it will be until he reaches the level of their progenitor. Elric looks at Otto Hahn in confusion, and he says to Elric that he knows that he must have a lot of questions, but they will all be answered naturally with time. Otto Hahn explains that the progenitor has both accomplished and left many things in this land. Otto Hahn tells Elric that they have prepared many assignments for him to follow the progenitor, so all he needs to do is diligently walk that path. Elric agrees, saying that he will just make sure to take this ice crystal with him. Otto Hahn apologizes to Elric for placing this heavy burden on him, saying that this path is one that only he, the Lord of Mervinger, can walk. He asks Elric to go and perfect the winter. Elric informs Mephisto that he has been told to take this ice crystal to the god of camellia. Mephisto laughs and says that Otto Hahn is trying to create winter. He asks Mephisto if he knows what winter means. Mephisto replies that he knows about it as their 4 abdominal seasons that haunted demon kings like him. Elric requests Mephisto to tell him more about it in detail. Mephisto asks Elric why he would. Elric offers the Aegyo exemption for 4 days. Mephisto smirks, asking how long the Aegyo exemption will work for. Elric grits his teeth and adds a mute exemption to his offer, saying that he will not do more than this. Mephisto chuckles and agrees. Mephisto begins to explain that there are 4 retainers that assisted their progenitor in raising the foundation of Mervinger. Mephisto tells Elric that their names are Summer, Autumn, Spring, and Winter. Because their personalities and characters fit each of the seasons, the demons called them the 4 Seasons. He informs Elric that among them, Otto Hahn corresponded to Winter. Mephisto says to Elric that, in any case, the fact that someone like that stayed behind as a guide to the assignments, which would mean that Otto Hahn is trying to pass down the power he once had to him. Hearing this, Elric wonders if, once this assignment is done, he can also receive assignments from the other 4 seasons. Obtaining the powers of the 4 seasons would mean he could become as strong as the progenitor, whom they assisted. Elric looks at his tattooed hand and thinks if he can continue to absorb seals as powerful as the seal of cruelty, or even stronger, so it won't be impossible to rebuild the family. He asks Mephisto what is important about this ice crystal for the god of camellia to need it. Mephisto replies that the ice crystal is the core of winter, formed only in the deepest parts of an ice mountain covered in perpetual snow. Mephisto adds that, in other words, it is the egg of a spirit, and since the camellia is a flower that blooms in winter, there is no better flower pot than the ice crystal. Elric asks where he has to go to meet the god of camellia. Mephisto replies that it is probably in the Temple of Flowers somewhere in the north. Elric looks at Mephisto in disbelief and confesses that he has only heard about it in stories. He asks Mephisto if it really exists. Mephisto confirms his suspicion and replies that the noisy bastard is probably guarding the temple. Elric knows that he can only be sure after he looks through the records in the Imperial Library. He stares at Mephisto and realizes that he is being too friendly. Elric wonders what Mephisto is planning this time. Elric sees that Mephisto's spirit form became a bit more vivid. Mephisto smirks, realizing that Elric seems to have noticed that his power has returned a little. He chuckles, thinking that Elric has no choice but to become stronger through the assignments. Elric realizes that even though the assignments make him stronger, they also make Mephisto stronger at the same time. He thinks that he may be reviving a great demon king that will plunge this world into distress. Mephisto notices the off look on Elric's face and chuckles, thinking that Elric must be afraid. Mephisto knows that he is uncomfortable with leaving a Mervinger to become stronger, but it cannot be helped because his recovery takes priority. He sees Elric smiling creepily and wonders why he is smiling again and if he has gone mad. Elric giggles, thinking that it means he can take even more from Mephisto. He knows that for Mephisto to regain his power and escape from him, he will have to become stronger. Elric says to Mephisto that since he has done everything he needed to, they shall head back up. As they begin to go, Elric tells Mephisto that it was hard enough to head down there just a month ago, but now it is a piece of cake. Mephisto says to Elric that he is truly egotistical to the core. Elric asks Mephisto if he shall head to where the Crimson Eye tribe is, since he needs a guide. Elric knows that he is not sure if it is because he has been at a quarrel with Yetis for such a long time, or because he has swallowed the Ice Mountain King's seal, but he kind of wants to see them. Elric's eyes widen when he sees the dead bodies of Yetis and blood everywhere. He wonders what in the world happened here. Mephisto looks around and remarks that, seeing that they were killed slowly when they could have been killed instantly, they must have been used for entertainment. Mephisto says that he does not know who did this, but they have a nature far more atrocious than most demons. Elric states that he is feeling like shit. He thinks that since Yetis are monsters, they can die at any time. Elric knows that even though he has killed many Yetis, he has never once treated them as playthings. Elric grits his teeth when he feels a discomforting feeling. He wonders if it is because he swallowed the Ice Mountain King's duty. Elric calms down, reminding himself that he is not the Ice Mountain King, and he has no right to feel sympathy for the Yetis. In the next moment, he spots something under the snow layer. He begins to dig under the snow and takes out the dead body of the child. Elric yells in sorrow when he realizes that this is the child who welcomed him with excitement when he came here before.